So good afternoon again, Excellency, Honorable Speaker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Warmly welcome to our 13th panel discussion of AVI-SDGs Dialogue. My name is Kim Liang, a junior researcher for Center for Sustainable Development Study of Asian Region Institute. And this is my great pleasure to be a moderator for today's program. And our SDG dialogue today have brought the topics of sustainable finance, environmental, social, and government approach to the floor discussion. And we would like to understand on what are the progress and talent in achieving the sustainable finance, environment, and social and government. What are the key interventions being implemented to support sustainable finance amid the COVID-19 pandemic? And what are the proposed short-term intervention and long-term strategy for supporting sustainable finance for post-COVID-19 recovery? So, Excellency, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, in this meantime, we are honored to have our prominent leader and researcher from a diverse development field who will deliver their values about common in our program today. And before starting our program, please allow me to introduce our honorable speaker who are waiting on the screen to share their presentation and comment. So first, please allow me to introduce His Excellency thirteenth, Secretary of State of the Ministry of Environment and the second Vice Chair of the NCSD. His Excellency Dr. thirteenth joined the Cambodian Ministry of Environment in 1994 after receiving his PhD degree in technical science. And from 1996 to 2009, he has been managing a number of environment, energy, and climate change projects in Cambodia. Between the 2009 to 2020, he served as a Secretary General of the National Council for Sustainable Development, which is NCSD. So the second, please give a warmly welcome to our honorable speaker, Mrs. Bernadette Victorio, Regional Program Lead, Fair Finance Asia, Oxfam, Cambodia. Mrs. Bernadette Victorio is an international development and finance specialist with the extensive experience delivering high-impact initiatives and a variety of strategy management and policy advocacy role in organizations including the Asia Development Bank, German International Cooperation Agency, and the affiliate of financial inclusion. She also proven track record in the influencing policy decision on financial inclusion, sustainable finance, and ESG investment transparency and accountability. She originally from the Philippines, and she lives and works across highly diverse development and cultural in Asia, including Japan, Thailand, Malaysia, and Cambodia. And currently, Mrs. Bernadette leads on Oxfam NOWEB's regional program, Fair Finance Asia, which aims to accelerate policy implementation and action on the sustainable finance and responsible cross-border investment across Asia. She holds a master's degree in international development from the International University of Japan. And third, please give a warm welcome to our honorable speaker, Ms. Rachana Lai, Senior Vice President, Head of Retail Business, Retail Banking, Chikmong Commercial Banks. Ms. Rachana currently serves as a Senior Vice President of Chikmong Commercial Bank in charge of retail banking and brand management, and also a board member of FWD Insurance in Cambodia. Before joining Chitmong Commercial Bank, she was a deputy CEO of a foreign trade bank of Cambodia with 14 years and also served as the chairwoman of Sustainable Finance Committee of the Association of Banks. Ms. Rachana holds a master's degree in business administration from Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand and a bachelor degree from the Royal University of Law and Economics in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. So, Excellency, Honorable Speaker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to follow our agenda today, we will start our captivating program with the first agenda, a rule of Oxfam for sustainable finance, progress, challenge, and recommendation, which will convey the speak by Ms. Bernadette Victorio. And the second, the role of Chitmong Bank for sustainable finance, progress, challenge, and recommendation, which the speak will be delivered by Ms. Rajane. And the third is on government policy and strategies for sustainable finance. The speak will be delivered by His Excellency Dr. Timpanov. And for the last of our agenda, we will open the floor for joining discussion. And then we will have a photo group section at the end of our program. So, Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to have any question during the presentation periods, please drop your question on our Facebook Live or our Zoom chat box. So without further ado, I would like to begin our program. Please allow me to invite Honorable Speaker from Oxfam, Mrs. Bernadette Victorio, to deliver her speech. Mrs., please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody and to my fellow speakers. Thank you for inviting me here. I would like to share my screen, so can you just give me one moment while I try to do this. Are you able to see my screen? Yes? Okay. Can you still see it? Can you see it now? Like, is it on presentation mode?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, it's on present now.
Sorry?
It's on now. You can press it.
Yes. Is it correct now?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Bernadette Victorio. I lead the Fair Finance Asia program from Oxfam, and it's my pleasure to be with you today on this dialogue on sustainable finance and environmental, social, and governance approaches. For those of you who are not aware, Fair Finance Asia is an Oxfam regional initiative, which is a network of over 100 civil society organizations committed to ensuring that financial institutions operating in the region are upholding the social and environmental rights and well-being of local communities. We have active coalitions of civil society organizations in Cambodia, India, Indonesia, Japan, Pakistan, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam at the moment. And we are very much working closely at the regional level as well on topics such as responsible investments in food and agriculture, in the ASEAN Sustainable Finance Taxonomy, and Fair Finance Asia is also very much involved in the leadership governance role for the C20, Civil 20 platform, which is being led by Indonesia this year. Fair Finance Asia coalitions leverage the Fair Finance Guide International methodology to benchmark the policies of 44 of the largest banks and insurers across Asia. And we develop in-depth case studies to monitor the practices of these financial institutions on the ground. Fair Finance Asia is part of a broader network, which is a global network called Fair Finance International, which is also active in Europe, in Latin America, and in Africa. So Last year, Fair Finance Asia actually did a study called Asia's Dystopian Future. And this study is basically together with our partner from the Center for Research on Multinational Corporations. And here we try to look at the outlook for Asia in terms of what will happen in the region if financial institutions continue to ignore their responsibilities and role to promote environmental, social, and governance standards. Of course, we also looked at the context where Asia is officially not on track to reach the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And this was data from 2020, which was still the beginning of pandemic. So obviously, there would have been some also changes between then and now, but hopefully, most likely this is also for the worse given the impacts of the pandemic. And even before the COVID pandemic, we are also aware that there are already severe disruptions in the supply chains that contribute to the region not being able to meet its development goals. Progress in economic growth has not been sustainable, and some trends need to be reversed to prevent further environmental and social harm. We also confirm that there are very serious financing gaps to reach the SDGs. For example, in inclusive infrastructure and energy transition away from fossil fuels in the region. This is a big need. And our study also found that it's more difficult to achieve the SDGs due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which increased the inequalities for various vulnerable groups, including local communities working in supply chains, women who have had to take more responsibilities for care work during the pandemic. And this was also exacerbated by other external factors that included external conflicts like in Myanmar, and also what we are experiencing now, which is the hyperinflation being caused by the war in Ukraine, which is also impacting already our region due to the higher costs of commodities. We also saw in our study that not only is Asia not on track to meet its sustainable development goals, it's also not on track to meet its Paris climate goals as a region. And this is because the greenhouse gas emission challenges of the region is basically very large, with India emitting with some of the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases being found in the region, such as India, Japan, China. And it also doesn't help that national commitments being developed by countries are unrealistic, especially in terms of reducing GHG emissions. And we also know that because of the pandemic, a lot of the countries are starting to go back on business as usual mode, which means that there is also growing demand in energy to meet that back to business context. And the global emission and global emission twice the environment target by 2030. And this is not even counting the post-pandemic recovery targets. Our study also found that public and private financing gap are still there. And this is, for example, in the ASEAN alone, we need up to 200 billion US dollars to finance infrastructure, agricultural, and renewable energy development in order to transition sustainably to meet our Paris climate goals. And this doesn't even take into account actual investments needed to make the swift energy transition in line with the International Energy Association's recommendation, which basically says that developing countries in Asia should be going net zero by 2050. Climate change is already happening, and we feel it very much in this region, and it will continue to rapidly progress and increase in a hot and disorderly scenario, which was already also forecasted by Network for Greening the Financial System and the new IPCC report that came out just a couple of months ago. Now, what does this mean if we don't meet our Sustainable Development Goals and our Paris climate goals in Asia? What does this mean for banks and the financial sector? Well, non-compliance comes with big risks for the banks, and this is what we know in Fair Finance Asia, and this is why we also try to advocate to the banks that there is, in fact, a very big business case for them to comply to environmental, social, and governance standards to avoid these risks. And what are these risks? These are credit risks due to the climate change, environment, labor, and human rights, and social impact on borrowers. There could be a big stress for them not being able to repay, for example, their loans that they borrow in the future. And this is a risk for financial institutions. And market risks are also there. So due to the changes in the economy, the prices, consumption patterns, the energy production, stability, there could be very big risk on the market, which could also impact the businesses of financial institutions and the sector overall. And the indication of potential loss of loan and underwriting services for the changing energy production, for example, is valued at approximately 243 billion. And this was figures only before the pandemic when we collected this data. And there is also, of course, very big risks to operation. And this is coming from the intensifying climate change and its impact, where there could be potential damages, to the assets of these financial institutions that are operating in many of the developing countries that are feeling the impacts very much. And that also includes very much the reputational risks and the loss of clients and the pressure from shareholders that could come with increasing awareness of the relationship or of the responsibility of financial institutions in promoting more sustainable practices, more responsible investments across the region. So what can the financial sector do in order to promote sustainable finance and just transition across the region in Asia and in ASEAN? Well, they have to, look into the governance and make sure that there is top management buy-in, changing the business model, strategies, and operations away from financing unsustainable activities and companies towards more sustainable practices, consultations with stakeholders, including bank clients, shareholders, and civil society organizations that represent the local community voices. Risk management view also needs to change, and this includes new risk assessment methodologies and capital reserve allocation, sustainability and forward-looking scenario building, and stress testing. And this requires policy coordination, not only in one country, but across the region, within ASEAN, within Asia, and internationally. They also have to actively engage borrowers and request all necessary ESG information and and impose ESG conditions to their borrowers. And this is definitely part of the due diligence that we are calling for financial institutions to implement in their business practices, to put conditionalities in their lending, particularly to businesses that could potentially contribute to harmful practices socially, environmentally. And this is really important role for the financial sector to play. Sectoral risks and policy assessment methodologies should also phase out and stop financing activities that cause significant environmental and social damage. And there needs to be a strong focus on, for example, policy tools such as the ASEAN taxonomy being developed or already developed, which defines essentially what are the sustainable sectors or businesses or practices, or what are the green, environmentally sustainable practices that we should continue, and how we should transition our important sectors in alignment with these definitions and strategic way forward. And of course, beyond risk assessment, there has to be sustainability impact assessment. This is also very important. The financial institutions or the financial sector overall only look at the risks, which definitely is very much related to the bottom line. But we have to also think about what is the impacts. There has to be an assessment of how those businesses that are being financed are impacting local communities, vulnerable groups, indigenous communities, gender equality, women in the supply chain, this needs to be also part of their assessment. And there is a need for high due diligence standards to avoid and phase out negative ESG impacts and labor rights and human rights impacts. And this also, again, requires policy coordination. So across Asia, for example, and within ASEAN, there has to be a very strong collaboration between regulators and financial institutions on how to do this. Otherwise, businesses or financial institutions that are not complying to higher standards will still continue to find loopholes, and it will continue to promote this race to the bottom rather than race to the top, or who is, having the more sustainable and responsible practices. There also has to be grievance mechanisms and remedial procedures for compensations put in place, especially for communities and vulnerable groups that are impacted by different harmful practices by the businesses. Increasing and financing of sustainable activities also have to be amplified, and this includes promoting innovative financial services and products. And this links to, for example, looking and promoting more sustainable MSMEs and providing more financing for smallholder businesses that are complying to sustainability standards. And this is not always easy because usually the banks and financial institutions, they look for the big, investments, the ones with the bigger, impact in terms of profit. And therefore, we have blended finance and different forms of financing and different tools and products that could respond to this. But we also, call on banks and financial institutions to consider piloting these types of innovative products to accommodate the growth of these type of new financing and businesses. Advisory function to borrowers should also be there in order to build capacity on ESG understanding. So the banks, should also explain to the companies, why are they putting such conditionalities in their lending? Why are they having such exclusion lists? Why are they, requiring such level of ESG transparency and accountability? And this is important to build the capacity of businesses, especially in developing countries like in Cambodia and across Asia. It's also important to use science-based criteria for setting targets and commitments as financial institutions and avoid greenwashing. We see this a lot, and this is really a big risk that we see as Fair Finance Asia, because more and more financial institutions are trying to hide, the real impact of their work and greenwashing their activities. And this has to be spotted. And that's why we need civil society organizations that have to work and spot and track these type of activities. Inclusive finance is also a very big point that should be the focus of financial institutions, which also links to the point about innovative financial services and products. Mandatory disclosure and transparency requirements are also very important. We have to look at sustainability, strategy, operations, resources, and responsibilities. We have to look into loan exposures per industry or sectors and countries and what needs to be phased out. And that's why developing sustainable green taxonomies, they call, is very important, because then you have a better definition of what activities need to be phased out, what businesses needs to be transitioned, and how such transition could happen is something that the strategy could address. And innovations and services to contribute actively, basically, to sustainability objectives. Finally, recommendations to regulators, supervisors, and legislators. This is really important because we still don't have any mandatory approach or legally binding measures to prevent environmentally and socially harmful practices in the financial sector. And this is one of the calls of Fair Finance Asia, that we would like regulators and financial supervisors in Asia to pay more attention to this ESG risks, the impact assessments, and defining the sustainable activities and activities with negative impacts in line with the taxonomies and sustainable finance frameworks being developed to phase out, financing activities for those with negative impacts to communities and vulnerable groups, to phase in financing for more activities that are supportive of sustainability. And it's not only about taking the money out of negative impact, but practices that's with negative impacts, but it's also moving the funding and the capital towards activities that really promote sustainability and long-term goals in environmental and social governance criteria alignments. Strengthening supervisory practices to identify ESG risks and impacts. It's very important to look at stranded assets and inadequate capital reserve allocations and to ensure that there are sufficient resources. I think this is, again, looking back into what areas or what sectors or what businesses could potentially fall under this category of stranded assets, and making sure that there is a strategic planning on how to address these issues, and to develop forward-looking scenarios with climate, sustainable development goals, and social aspects very much part of the strategy development. And this requires collaboration within the national government. It's not only the financial regulators that are responsible for this, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Environment, and all other relevant ministries, including the ones that are looking after social protection, are also very important in this. And finally, promoting diversity of the banking sector to allow agile financing and sustainable innovations and inclusive finance, which is really at the very heart of what we should be doing in moving towards a more just transition and sustainable transition to meet our climate and sustainable development goals. I will end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bernadette, for your nice presentation, and that would be a good start for our discussion later. And next, I would like to invite our honorable speaker from Chitmong Commercial Bank, Ms. Rachana Lai, to convey her remarks. So, Ms., please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me on behalf of Chitmong Commercial Bank to share what we have done in the sustainable finance. So let me start the presentation with 4 items here. The first one is about our corporate profile. So as you may know, the Chitmong Commercial Bank is a part of our Chitmong Group, starting from 13 business units, as you can see here. So Chitmong Group have been involved in a lot of sectors, including trading, real estate development, beverage, cement factory, hotel and hospitality. We also have involved in supermarket, real estate development, and lately this is the development of Chitmong Bank to create in 1998. So our bank established operation officially from 2019. So just to summarize that, since 2019 until now, we already been in the market 3.5 years. Even this is a new bank, but as the big engagement from the shareholder, we already invest in the this bank bonded certified paid up capital. About the requirement of the central bank, the central bank requirement is only $75 million. So the total asset of the bank is over $1 billion as of now. We had a deposit of 100 million and the loan outstanding over 350 million. So in summary, we opened 13 branches, where 10 branches in Phnom Penh and the other 3 branches is in province, including Kampong Cham, Siem Reap, and Battambang. We also got license from the central bank to set up Asian banking. We have 134 Asian banking where they are playing very important role to support our operation, just like mini branches. I think a part of sustainable finance where the bank have a clear objective that we want to be a digital bank. So with this digital bank, we try to set up all the digital platforms. So as you can see here, beside ATM, CRM, we provide to the customer to use for operation. We also have mobile banking. We also part of Wakong's platform from the central bank, where right now customer can pay through KHQR of Chimong Bank, many other banks. So all the member, around 21 member of Wakong, other commercial bank, FI, so can share each other through the KHQR. We also a member of CSS. CSS is a Cambodian share switch platform where all the banks they can share ATM. Customer from all the bank can withdraw money, deposit through the ATM of the member of CSS. We also introduced UPI, is the Union Pay platform where the customer can set up a virtual card and pay through online merchant. And coming up, we introducing the Visa card as well as the RIA. RIA is the money transfer from customer to customer. So with this, I think all the platform will help the bank to minimize the traffic at the branch. So customers do not need to travel to the branch. It's available 24 hours, it's available 7 days a week. So that is very helpful for minimize all the, not only the travel, but also the transaction that normally have to access through the counter that require filling information, we require the paper transaction. So in 2019, Chimong Bank have become a member of, we become a member of Cambodian Sustainable Finance. I think Bea also mentioned about this, that the Association of Bank Cambodia has set up Cambodian Sustainable Finance that developed the 9 principles here to voluntarily require all the member of this, mostly member bank Cambodia. We have right now 47 commercial member bank that join in this Cambodian Sustainable Finance. So all the bank that be a member of this Sustainable Finance, they have to adopt all these 9 principles. I think learning from this, what Chimong Bank have been done since we already planned for offshore private bond that a part of this will be under CGIF guarantee. CGIF guarantee is mean that the bank has adopted all the ESR and policy drafting, and with this we have one support from the technical assistant from Mekong strategic partner that will support all member bank to establish our ESR policy and all the compliance that required under this guarantee as well. The second part that we also planning to do is the green fund and green financing. So we're looking for green fund that can be a part of our cost of fund, can be made of our cost of fund lower, so that we can use this fund to finance some sustainable finance projects such as the renewable energy sector or real example that we have here. We talking to Tata company that they reduce the electric tuk-tuk so that if we have a good cost of funding that we can support this kind of financing. I think at the bank level we try to make things in a sustainable way through the first day of the bank opening. So if you come to see our bank, bank, there is a bit different from other banks because we try first. One is the digital area where we set up a digital area every branches to allow customer to access to our digital platform. Secondly, we start up with all the system. So with the system, allow the bank not to use on the everything doing the operation on the hard copy. From that, as you may remember that last year we had the Phnom Penh lockdown, where most of the bank was closed and there was very limited to travel and allow the bank to open the branch for operation. So with that, I think Chip Mong Bank had no issue on this because we all prepare to work on online where our core banking digital platform that are available to the customer. So the customer have many ways to access to our services. And everybody that work from home, they can also work through the online. That is a well prepared for the future of digitalization. So as mentioned, that all these platforms, mobile banking, internet banking, QR, barcode transfer, and all the Visa network here allow the customer to right now use our service everywhere without seeing the present to the bank or come travel to the bank. I think in terms of working environment, what the bank has done, that we take this as a good example that we try to maximize what we have, like saving energy and using the green space, open space. And from this, I think it's not only for environment, but also for well-being of the employee in the bank as well. However, like Bea mentioned, I think like other commercial banks, we also have challenging in supporting the sustainable finance as one of the main challenge. You can see here that this kind of local commercial bank, we mobilize the deposit through the local depositor that bring us the cost of fund is high. So with the high cost of fund, it's just like high material cost of material. So if we have a high cost of material, it would be a challenging that we could not lend to some sustainable finance project at a very good rate. And this is a market that is very challenging for the bank. So there is also an issue on the investment and priority, where we should focus for the new bank and what would be the next step. That I think compared to the long-standing bank or international bank or regional bank, I think we still could not compete in terms of investment and priority in the ESG. So this is all the challenges we have. By the way, we also try to improving on this. Like what we mentioned, that we try to getting access to the offshore lending, going for the issuing of the bond, so where we can find a cheap cost on our fund, so to support. And a part of this, we I think been discussing with the Ministry of Environment as well to expose the international level on the green financing. Last but not least, as the part of the Chip Mong Group, this is just to share information that we have participated a lot in the corporate social responsibility. So during these 2 years, for the COVID-19, I think as the Chip Mong Group, we have donated over 20 million cash to the government, to the hospital, to the school, and also Cambodian Red Cross. We also joining with the other school to support the infrastructure innovation, as well as providing the medicine and other support during the time of COVID combat from the government. So last but not least, let me share you a video clip that we've been producing, and we was receiving the environmental award from the Ministry of Environment twice in the last 2 years. Thank you very much.
បំរែបំរួលនៃភពផែនដីគឺជាទំនួលខុសត្រូវរបស់មនុស្សគ្រប់រូបដើម្បីចូលរួមគាំពារភពផែនដីធនាគារជីបម៉ុងបដិញ្ញាវិនិយោគប្រកបដោយនិរន្តរភាពធនាគារជីបម៉ុងគឺជាសមាជិកនៃគំនិតផ្ដួចផ្ដើមហិរញ្ញវត្ថុប្រកបដោយចីរភាពកម្ពុជារបស់សមាគមធនាគារកម្ពុជាដូច្នេះធនាគារនេះបដិញ្ញាការពារបរិស្ថានមនុស្សជាតិវប្បធម៌ចំណេះដឹងហិរញ្ញវត្ថុបរិយាបន្នហិរញ្ញវត្ថុទំនើបកម្មហិរញ្ញវត្ថុស្តង់ដារសង្គមនិងបរិស្ថាន footprint សង្គមនិងបរិស្ថានព្រមទាំងគណនេយ្យភាពនិងតម្លាភាពធនាគារជីបម៉ុងដាក់ឲ្យដំណើរការកម្មវិធីទូរស័ព្ទដៃជីបម៉ុង Bank App និងធនាគារតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតដែលអតិថិជនអាចធ្វើប្រតិបត្តិការសាច់ប្រាក់បំរែបំរួលនៃភពផែនដីគឺជាទំនួលខុសត្រូវរបស់មនុស្សគ្រប់រូបដើម្បីចូលរួមគាំពារភពផែនដីធនាគារជីបម៉ុងបដិញ្ញាវិនិយោគប្រកបដោយនិរន្តរភាពធនាគារជីបម៉ុងគឺជាសមាជិកនៃគំនិតផ្ដួចផ្ដើមហិរញ្ញវត្ថុប្រកបដោយចីរភាពកម្ពុជារបស់សមាគមធនាគារកម្ពុជាដូច្នេះធនាគារនេះបដិញ្ញាការពារបរិស្ថានមនុស្សជាតិវប្បធម៌ចំណេះដឹងហិរញ្ញវត្ថុបរិយាបន្នហិរញ្ញវត្ថុទំនើបកម្មហិរញ្ញវត្ថុស្តង់ដារសង្គមនិងបរិស្ថាន footprint សង្គមនិងបរិស្ថានព្រមទាំងគណនេយ្យភាពនិងតម្លាភាពធនាគារជីបម៉ុងដាក់ឲ្យដំណើរការកម្មវិធីទូរស័ព្ទដៃជីបម៉ុង Bank App និងធនាគារតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតដែលអតិថិជនអាចធ្វើប្រតិបត្តិការសាច់ប្រាក់ទូទាត់ចំណាយបើកគណនីឬស្នើកម្ចីទីកន្លែងណាក៏បានដែលជួយកាត់បន្ថយការធ្វើដំណើររបស់អតិថិជននិងការបំភាយឧស្ម័នកាបូនិកធនាគារជីបម៉ុងក៏កាត់បន្ថយការប្រើប្រាស់ក្រដាសជាអតិបរមាលើគ្រប់ផលិតផលនិងសេវាកម្មធនាគារប្រតិបត្តិការដកប្រាក់មិនផ្ដល់វិក័យប័ណ្ណក្រដាសជូនឡើយរាល់ការផ្ដល់កម្ចីពីធនាគារជីបម៉ុងត្រូវបានពិនិត្យអំពីផលប៉ះពាល់លើបរិស្ថាននិងសង្គមទន្ទឹមនឹងគ្នានេះបុគ្គលិកធនាគារជីបម៉ុងធ្វើការងារជាប្រចាំលើប្រព័ន្ធកុំព្យូទ័រនិង Digital ដែលអាចជៀសវាងការប្រើប្រាស់ក្រដាសចំណែកទំនាក់ទំនងនិងសំណើផ្សេងៗត្រូវធ្វើតាមអនឡាញតាមវិធីកុំព្យូទ័រឬទូរស័ព្ទដៃរឹតតែពិសេសជាងនេះធនាគារជីបម៉ុងបានបំពាក់ប្រព័ន្ធបិទម៉ាស៊ីនត្រជាក់ស្វ័យប្រវត្តិកន្លែងបិទបើកទឹកប្រើប្រាស់មានសេចក្តីណែនាំអំពីការសន្សំសំចៃក្នុងការិយាល័យបំពាក់ដោយធុងចម្រោះទឹកដែលបុគ្គលិកអាចប្រើកែវទឹកផ្ទាល់ខ្លួនពិសាជួយកាត់បន្ថយការប្រើប្រាស់ដបប្លាស្ទិកកាកសំណល់ត្រូវបានគ្រប់គ្រងយ៉ាងមានអនាម័យបំផុតកាត់បន្ថយការប្រើប្រាស់ម៉ាស៊ីនព្រីននិងម៉ាស៊ីនថតចម្លងបន្ទប់ប្រជុំបំពាក់ដោយប្រព័ន្ធ Digital ទាំងក្រៅអគារនិងក្នុងអគារលម្អដោយរុក្ខជាតិបៃតងស្រស់នាពេលអនាគតធនាគារជីបម៉ុងនឹងបើកការិយាល័យកណ្ដាលនៅមណ្ឌលពាណិជ្ជកម្មជីបម៉ុងការិយាល័យកណ្ដាលនេះនឹងលម្អដោយរុក្ខជាតិបៃតងព្រមទាំងបំពាក់ដោយប្រព័ន្ធ Digital ក្នុងបន្ទប់ប្រជុំនិងការិយាល័យធ្វើការព្រមទាំងប្រើប្រាស់ថាមពលប្រកបដោយប្រសិទ្ធភាពដោយបំពាក់ប្រព័ន្ធបិទបើកភ្លើងស្វ័យប្រវត្តិធនាគារជីបម៉ុងគឺជាពាណិជ្ជកម្មមួយរបស់ក្រុមហ៊ុនជីបម៉ុងដែលវិនិយោគប្រកបដោយទំនួលខុសត្រូវខ្ពស់ចំពោះសង្គមនិងបរិស្ថានដោយក្រុមហ៊ុនបំពាក់រោងចក្រសម្អាតទឹកកខ្វក់បន្សុទ្ធផ្សែងពុលនិងបំលែងកាកសំណល់ជាថាមពលនៅរោងចក្រខ្មែរ AVI-SDGs បំពាក់ប្រព័ន្ធសូឡាទាញយកថាមពលនិងរោងចក្រដុតកាកសំណល់ឧស្សាហកម្មបំលែងជាថាមពលយកមកប្រើប្រាស់នៅក្នុងរោងចក្រស៊ីម៉ង់ជីបម៉ុងអ៊ីនស៊ីមានរថយន្តសម្អាតផ្លូវ4គ្រឿងសម្អាតផ្លូវឥតគិតថ្លៃ25ខែក្រុង ដាំដើមឈើ 12000 ដើមក្នុងមួយឆ្នាំបរិច្ចាគធុងសម្រាមរាប់ពាន់ធុងនិងឧបត្ថម្ភរថយន្តដឹកសម្រាមខ្នាតតូច50គ្រឿងជូនក្រសួងបរិស្ថានដើម្បីចូលរួមការពារបរិស្ថាន
ពិតជាមានកិត្តិយសហើយជាពិសេសក៏សប្បាយរីករាយបំផុតដែលយើងបានទទួលបានសរសើរមេត្រីភាពក្រសួងបរិស្ថានយើងខិតខំបន្ថែមទៅធ្វើមិនឲ្យអ្វីដែលយើងបានហ្នឹងគឺបានតទៀតមិនមែនបានតែប៉ុណ្្នឹងគឺយើងឈប់ហើយជាពិសេសក៏យើងខិតខំថាយើងធ្វើដើម្បីឲ្យបរិស្ថានយើងស្អាតទាំងអស់
ដោយសារការបដិញ្ញាចិត្តខ្ពស់ចំពោះការគាំពារបរិស្ថានធនាគារជីបម៉ុងបានទទួលបានសរសើរមេត្រីភាពបរិស្ថានពីក្រសួងបរិស្ថាននៅថ្ងៃទី2 មីនា 2020ដែលជាកម្លាំងចលករជំរុញឲ្យធនាគារជីបម៉ុងបន្តបដិញ្ញាវិនិយោគប្រកបដោយនិរន្តរភាព
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rajana, for your nice and insightful presentation. And for the next agenda, I would like to turn the floor to our honorable speaker from Ministry of Environment, His Excellency Dr. Tan Punlok, to deliver his remarks. His Excellency, please, the floor is yours. His Excellency, please unmute your mic.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here, and good afternoon to everyone. But you know that sustainable financing is a key building block of climate response or biodiversity conservation architecture. Cambodia, as many other countries, has endorsed its SDG, CSDG, the Cambodia Sustainable Development Goal for up to 2030. And I think we have adopted the indicator under the 17+1 goals. The extra one is demanding for Cambodia. It's 169 global indicators. We have adopted to 109 just to show our contact. And of course, to implement all the proposed action, we need finance, especially sustainable finance. I think the estimate is about 12 trillion globally needed to implement the proposed action to achieve SDG globally. Of course, Cambodia has been doing a lot of homework to support the implementation of SDG. If you look at the government plan, both at the national and subnational level, as well as party to international agreement, especially the climate change agreement, you will see that we have developed quite a number of policy strategies and plan to support the implementation. Ultimately, it's really to support sustainable development, which is that is low carbon, resilient, and socially inclusive. I can list a few, which I think is really important, especially among least developed country. I think Cambodia is quite advanced. First of all, we submitted on time the nationally determined contribution, which outline our action for addressing climate change up to 2030. That's happened in late 2020, and last year in late December 2021, we submitted our long-term strategy for carbon neutrality. The target is related to by 2050, Cambodia would become carbon neutral. I can say that we are number 3 in among LDC, number 74 globally to submit that plan, and number 3 among LDC, just behind Benin and Nepal. And we are the first ASEAN country which put 2050 as a year for achieving carbon neutrality. And of course, sector ministry will have to develop a respective plan, policy, and measure to achieve this target. A few of them, for example, Ministry of Mine and Energy is finalizing the power development plan for up to 2040, and it contains a scenario which will allow a diversity of energy source, kind of optimizing our energy mix from environmental, social, and economic perspectives. So there will be a lot more renewable energy, and as well for the first time energy efficiency. Electric vehicle, Ministry of Public Work and Transport put a target to achieve 70% of electric bike and 40% of vehicle by 2050. We are working on voluntary implementation of green building, certification standard for green building as well. And other sectors also have been active, waste management and so on. If you look at the investment law, the new investment law, you will see provision which provide incentive for projects in the area of climate change, biodiversity conservation, green technologies, circular economy, and so on. So the government, as you can see, also will provide incentive for private sector who decide to invest in this area. And we are working on finalization of greenhouse gas mitigation mechanism sub-decrees, to have a clear rules of the game, especially when in Glasgow last year in COP26, party agreed on Article 6 with of the Paris Agreement, which also provide opportunity for country to participate in greenhouse gas mitigation project and the carbon market compliant carbon market as well. Of course, having all these beautiful plans is one thing, but having resource of needed resource to implement this plan is much more critical. So based on our assessment, for long-term strategy for carbon neutrality, we would need from now on it's about 500 million per year to 3 billion. Up to 2030, we would need about 2 billion for adaptation and 6.8 billion for mitigation. So it's a huge amount of resources are required to implement all the proposed plan. Of course, I think we have done analysis, economic analysis, and what is the economic return of this plan. So for long-term strategy, I think if all the proposed plan are implemented, we will have about 2.8% increase of our GDP, which is very important, and about 500,000 of jobs are created. So there is clear evidence that green growth, green economy is makes sense economically, not just in terms of an environment and social aspect. So this is really important, and there's enough body of evidence for that. Of course, we have not been able to mobilize the needed resources. I think in 2020, we managed to mobilize about $600 million for climate change, half from domestic, about half from domestic source, and the other half is from international sources, bilateral and multilateral. For biodiversity, I think we have mobilized about 100 million against the need the needs about 300 million. But the good thing is that there's increasing interest of the private sector, and of course along with the government effort to create enabling environment in terms of policy, incentive, standard, and so on. So this increasing interest of the private sector to invest in climate response in biodiversity conservation, or to have a more environmentally friendly investment. And there's clear example, a colleague from Chipmong Bank already told us about this, and even the Association of Bank of Cambodia also endorsed this Cambodia sustainable finance, which is the first time for us as well. Because we try to attract more resource from outside, because international community, the so-called next one country, developed country actually, have made the commitment to pledge more funding to support climate action in developing country. So in Glasgow, they announced that they are committed to reach 100 billion US dollar target by 2023. So we are working with the national entities here, for example, the National Committee for Democratic Development at a subnational level, NCDD, to become implementing agency to have direct access to the Green Climate Fund. So this is the first entity, national entity, to have direct access to the Green Climate Fund. We are also working with private sector to support the public bank, agriculture and rural development bank, to become a national accredited entity, so that this bank can have direct access to cheap loan from the Green Climate Fund to support investment in by private sector in these green area, climate change, biodiversity conservation, and so on. Also, a private sector have their own initiative. Probably you may hear about this Renewable Energy 100 initiative, a global initiative taken by many multilateral corporations. So they have mitigation target, various year 2025, 2030, to become carbon neutral. So this is really important for us, because those companies will look at our energy profile, for example, how we produce electricity, what is our policy or standard, and so on, and they will make decision, future decision on their future investment based on this as well, because for them it's not just about public relation or about corporate social responsibility. It's economy as well. It's about money, because renewable energy is getting cheaper, technology is more accessible or more reliable. So so this is on the top of having more climate or environmentally aware consumer. So they do care about their reputation, about their name. I can give you an example right now. The electricity that we produce right now is very much, most is from hydropower and solar, some percentage from coal, and just an example, how important to diversify our energy source and to move away gradually from fossil fuel. Coal used to be $60 US per ton. Right now it's 400 plus. So you cannot make business based on this. So we need to look at the diversification. So this is really important. Of course, it's not best without problems, without challenges. Is one thing to have a good policy and plan, and other thing is how to implement it. Devil is in the details. What is our capacity to develop a good pipelines of project? Do we have the capacity to develop bankable projects? Whether we have good enabling environment to attract the private sector. Also, in terms of support from the developed country, and it's a lot of promises have been done so far, but never achieve those benchmark. I know they move target 2023 to achieve 100 billion per year for support to climate change activity in developing country. So we don't know about that, because we don't know whether this is just a transfer of all the ODA to climate change or just relabeling, or there's no way to track that. It's really based on the statement. And on the top of that, COVID also is having impact and consume a lot of resources in all countries throughout the world. And the latest challenge just emerged, which is evolving. I think the war in Ukraine also distract attention a little bit, I think, from climate change, from all the pressing issue, global issues. And the first impact that we are feeling is really the fossil fuel price, energy price, food price, fertilizer, and so on. And we don't know what will happen tomorrow, but and the outlook is quite grim because there is no sight, when it will end this war. So we have to be ready for this new, still evolving context. How do we further, promote green development for Cambodia in this context? But in any case, I think the outlook is quite positive despite all these many challenges. So we need to be more strategic to do better homework, especially our research, just provide economic case, economic evidence to our proposed policy. Create better enabling environment for private sector engagement in this sustainable financing green economy. Probably, I think we need to be more selective as well. We have limited resources, so prioritization is really key. What needs to be done first? Try to forget a quick result, quick impact with limited resources, and of course, building our capacity to develop pipeline, develop bankable project, to manage, to monitor implementation, and to implement, to develop, good policy, especially for private sector engagement. So at the Ministry of Environment, because we also serve at the Secretariat to the National Council for Sustainable Development. So just to let you know that we work on more than environmental protection, biodiversity conservation. We also focus on sustainable living, very diverse area, sustainable energy, sustainable mobility, circular economy, which sustainable consumption and production, sustainable city, and so on. So our portfolio is quite broad, but our focus is really on policy, and support resource mobilization, support of the ministry in mainstreaming these aspects into their plan, especially climate change, mobilize resources for implementation, and of course we play a key role in international negotiation, both for climate change and biodiversity. So I am to stop here, and thank you very much for having me again, and any questions, please.
Thank you so much, His Excellency, for your insightful presentation. And so, Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have been enjoying listening to our insightful comment from our honorable speaker. So our program now approaching to open the floor for discussion, and because of the time limit, we will randomly select a few questions for our presenter to address. So we will look for the question from the audience. We got one question from Ms. Nguyen Chandani. The question was, how COVID-19 impacted the interest of ESG in any way, or do you think it could actually make investors even more interested? So I would like to give the floor to Ms. Mrs. Bernadette.
Sure. Yes. Thank you for that question. If I understand it correctly, whether the COVID-19 has had an impact on the interest of investors to comply with ESG standards, is that correct? All right. Yes, we have seen as Fair Finance Asia, engages with investors. We definitely have seen some positive and negative impacts. On the negative side, a lot of the investors or financial institutions that we are assessing and our coalitions at the national level are working with, of course, with the pandemic and with the shrinking, economic opportunities during the restrictions of the pandemic, immediately their response is to try to recover the profits that are lost. And because of that kind of mindset of going back to business as usual, they of course use this as an excuse to maybe not comply to ESG standards as the expectations would be. And this is, of course, as explained by His Excellency, it's not that we want, to continue to remain to a state of non-economic recovery. Of course, what we would like to do, and this is, of course, the positive side, some of the financial institutions see an opportunity also to use the pandemic as a way to build better, using that phrase that is better, that we hear very often, is that now we see the issues that could arise. Now we see who are the really affected, groups during the pandemic. And then because of this new knowledge that we have, we can build back better. We can put new innovative policies and practices in place in order to address those issues and make sure that, we are not going back to business as usual, but that we are looking at those challenges and recalibrating our policies and practices in order to address them in a more meaningful way, with a long-term sustainability goal in mind. So that's the response. There's positive and there is negative impacts.
Thank you so much for your great comment on the question. And the next question I got from Mr. What's the name? He asked about, as the developing country is pursuing sustainable finance a top priority for Cambodia. I would like to give the floor to His Excellency Dr. Tân Kulov.
Thank you for all the questions. I think the question with come with answer already. Without finance, as I mentioned earlier, financing is one of the key building block in any international negotiation on climate change. For example, I just give an example. The other building block being measure like mitigation, adaptation, technology transfer, information, and so on. So it's an inseparable ingredient for successful sustainable development for green economy. So without finance, I don't think we can produce any result, any output, outcome, or impacts. So it is a necessary requirement. It's still a priority for us. Yeah, it will remain priority for us.
Yes, thank you so much, His Excellency, and hope our minister can get the answer. And for the next question, I would like to ask Ms. Rajana. So what type of support does the Development Bank need from the government to move the ESG agenda forward?
Thank you very much for the question. I think one of the challenges that we raised on the cost of fund for the commercial bank to support the sustainable project, we need fund that is very competitive. So what the government has support so far, I think during the COVID-19, as you may know that they set up SME bank co-financing scheme, the phase 1, phase 2, and now moving to phase 3, the co-financing for tourism recovery credit scheme. So with this, the fund that providing to commercial bank is very helpful. We use this fund to support business like SME that are affected from COVID-19. So on the tourism side, the hotel, restaurant, resort, any business production that related to the tourism, they benefit from this at very concessional rate. Concessional rate is mean that quite low compared to the market. Also condition to support the recovery of the SME sector. I think this one of the real example that been very successful in the banking industry. So from private sector, I think the most important one from the government is this kind of support. The intervention on the funding, especially if the government can support private sector to be accredited in accessing to green fund like Excellency Development. I think it would be very great that this is a long-term support that allow commercial bank to participate in the sustainable finance to make things happen and everybody benefit from this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ratana, for your comment on this question. With the same question, I would like to ask His Excellency that what type of support does the Ministry of Environment need from different stakeholders to move the ESG agenda forward, especially for the development sector?
Well, I think each stakeholder have their role to play. So we need really to work together on this. I give a case of a prospect outlook for private sector engagement. You know, we were the one behind the inclusion of provision on the support for climate, for biodiversity, for green investment in the new investment law. So that's what we have done, and now we are providing support to for a new draft policy, for example, on national productivity, economic productivity for Cambodia, because our productivity is quite low. So we also provide support, how to improve our productivity in the context of climate change, how to address, for example, heat impact in the workplace, in garment factory, in agro industry, how nutrition or food safety will over the long run will affect our productivity, or how should we be ready for green job, with the prospect of more green technology to be transferred, to be implemented for Cambodia. Specifically for our work with the private sector, I have already mentioned about our cooperation with Mekong strategic partner to support the Agriculture and Rural Development Bank to become accredited, so that they can have direct access to climate fund, a green climate fund. We have started discussion with a colleague from Chipmong as well. I think Madam Rachana joined our meeting back then with Minister on how how can we do, what can we do to support Chipmunk, you know, in this very long but time-consuming but rewarding, I hope, accreditation. There are some example already globally in Mongolia, South Africa, or India, where private bank managed to get the accreditation and access to cheap loan for green projects. So we think that this is has very good potential. But I think bank target bank, for example, Chipmunk probably will need to dedicate a strong team to work on it, you know, on how to meet the requirement, fiduciary standards, safeguard, social, environmental safeguard, gender, and so on. So there's a long list of requirements that need to be completed. It may take a few years, but I mean, it's you are number one, you will have a lot of advantage here, you know, because the Green Climate Fund can really provide a very cheap loan. I give you an example. We have received $40 million from the Green Climate Fund. That's the first big project from the Green Climate Fund. So the total budget for this project is 130 million, of which 90 million is from ADB loan, 40 million is from the Green Climate Fund. And of this 40 million, 30 million is grant, and 10 million is very concessional loan for this value chain project in agriculture. But the problem when you get the money through a multilateral implementing entity like the World Bank, ADB, or UN agency, you have to pay percentage to them. You know, they earn percentage from that. That's why we really push for direct access. You know, either a private bank or national entity or line ministry. I mentioned about NCDD, the first one who got the direct access. So that's I think really important. I mean, to support financing green project in Cambodia.
Oh, thank you so much, His Excellency. And we got one more question from the audience. His question was referred to Chipmunk Commercial Bank. You have mentioned about the talent and priority at the same high and low of the fund. Can you explain it once again? Please, Ms. Rachna.
Thank you for the question. Yes, what I mean here is that most of the bank, not only Chipmunk Bank, we as the local bank, we are challenging to find a local deposit cheap. So cheap means that right now we offer the deposit rate to the customer on average 5% per annum. So compared to regional or international bank that they get low cost from international level at 1 or 2%, it's quite incomparable. So when we got a cost of fund high, we would not be able to manage this lending to some sector that support on the renewable energy or any sustainable project at a low cost. So the opportunity that we would earn from this, like Excellency Development, there are actually a lot of green fund from the international level where we can access at concessional rate 1 or 2% based on the long list of requirements. So joining the sustainable finance, I think, would be a goal opportunity for many financial institutions that take a step to move to the international level and get a cheap cost to support on lending. So this kind of thing, it takes time, like Excellency mentioned, and normally with around the due diligence process or requirement, the requirement all including our time, effort, and investment and change transformation in the bank institution in order to comply all requirement of that standard, international standard, so that we can be what they call accredited entity to access to those funds. So it's a long process, but hopefully that we get support from Ministry of Environment and other regulator. So in the future, we would be prepared for that step. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. for your answer for the question. And the next question I would like to ask Ms. Benedict. So can there be an effective multi-stakeholder initiative of CSO, bank, and Ministry of Environment that would help to develop the concrete of ESG policy that can be adopted effectively in the banking sector for sustainable finance and development?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a great question, since we have colleagues and His Excellency here and Rachana, and of course, speaking from Oxfam and Fair Finance Asia, this is absolutely something that we are, calling for, and this is something that we do in all the countries where we are active, and hopefully also in Cambodia. As mentioned in my presentation, we think that a very focused and good consultations in assessing the risk and impacts of financial sector investments is something that is really worthwhile to be part of, the overall strategy in promoting compliance and transparency and accountability in ESG criteria. Of course, because this, provides an opportunity for all these stakeholders to bring into the table the important, issues that they have from their areas of work. And from here, of course, the civil society is able to bring that impact from the ground level, that could provide a good basis for decision-making for regulators, for the government, and for financial institutions. And we see that this is definitely a strategy, an approach that works in many countries where Fair Finance Asia is active. And this conversation, this dialogue, is definitely something that we hope is something that is not going to be one-off, but something that's continuing, something that is going to be, a relationship that is built on trust, and something that will continue, so that as also the countries and perhaps, for example, in Cambodia's case, it can aid, towards helping Cambodia to meet its goals as described by His Excellency also.
Thank you so much for your insightful comment on the question. So because of our time limit, I would like to end our discussion here. And before closing our program, may I please invite all honorable speakers for a group photo section, please. Please turn on your webcam. At the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Honorable Speaker, for your kind cooperation. Excellency, Honorable Speaker, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, before to end our program, please allow me to express my gratitude to all Honorable Speakers for spending your valuable time being with us today, and to follow our program till the end, and wish all our distinguished guests and honorable speakers stay safe from COVID-19 and have a nice health and have a great wonderful time. Please stay tuned, and thank you so much.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.